and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, Evan Ginzburg, and Mike Lano. Would you guys like to introduce our special guest for tonight?
Okay, Jamie Hemmings is the book editor for SlamWrestling.net. She is queen of the wrestling books and co-host of the figure Gore. And I love my old school horror films, so we'll talk a little about that as well tonight. And Dr. Lano, please introduce your guest.
Yes, I must be the male king of wrestling books. Stuff with photos I've had in pretty much every book. But we have my new friend via Les Thatcher, Joe Dombrowski. Joe is an announcer, videographer, promoter, and he has the fantastic, this really belongs in everybody's collection. Everybody should watch this who didn't go. All of the annual Brian Pillman Memorial Show anthologies, the 20th anniversary edition. I hope everybody can see this. We'll be talking to him about this. I want to know who did these caricatures of all these great wrestlers, but let me throw back to Evan and Buddy.
All right, so Jamie, I'm looking behind you at the memorabilia, and I see the Sting mask. So this would be a natural question that just popped in my head. What's the connection between wrestling and horror? Because Sting was sort of like a Phantom of the Opera type character in WCW.
Yeah, I think it carries over well, and just something I've noticed even before I started doing the Figure Gore podcast, which of course focuses on wrestling and horror, is just a lot of horror fans are also wrestling fans. Like, I'm a big Joe Bob Briggs fan. He's a horror host, and
Me too. I know Joe Bob Briggs.
Yeah. And there's a group I belong of his on Facebook, and it just struck me how interesting, like, people love wrestling as well, and they also like horror. Like, there's constantly wrestling posts, and sometimes I'll share some of the Slam stories on there too. Like, it just seems to fit together. Like, not every wrestling fan likes horror, but there seem to be a lot that like both.
Are you a fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000?
I didn't get into that. That's a little bit before. I know what it is, but I didn't really get into that. I only just discovered Joe Bob more recently because I grew up in a really small town in Canada. I had 2 channels for the longest time. I didn't get TNT and Monster Vision, all that stuff. So I kind of discovered when he went back to Shudder a few summers ago for a big marathon, that was his return to TV. That's when I discovered Joe Bob Briggs, and I'm trying to catch up. Yeah.
He's the king of the drive-in movie theaters. I think he's done some books.
Yes.
Newspaper reviews we got like 30 years ago in the San Francisco Chronicle. The guy was amazing, and I think the tagline at the end was something like Joe Bob gives it a rat's ass, check it out, or Joe Bob says
4 severed heads.
Joe Bob says check it out, yeah.
And usually 4 severed heads. He always has something dash foo, and you know, that's one of his taglines. So gives you a nice summary of it.
It's great to know he's still active and out there. I didn't know if he's still alive. So.
He's on the Shudder streaming service now. He's currently in season 3 of his show. He also do marathons like for different holidays throughout the year, but it's currently season 3, and it's been on Fridays, and there's 2 episodes left of this season.
I grew up on a lot of the movies that Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez grew up. I was actually at the Grindhouse, the Astor Theater in Brooklyn, and Times Square back in its less Disney-like days. And I grew up on American International Pictures, Toho, spaghetti westerns, and all the Grindhouse stuff. And quite often you'd have like a kung fu movie with a horror movie. And we loved Hammer, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And so I've always loved wrestling and horror. So I do see the connection, especially if you talk Undertaker and Kane. And Kane even did a horror movie.
And even The Fiend. Let's not forget The Fiend, although sometimes I'd like to.
I mean, to me, it's almost cartoonish what WWE does with it, but there is definitely a connection.
It's an escapism, I think. Both of them are very much fantasy escapism, so I think that's why it resonates with so many people.
During COVID, I was catching up on Jess Franco and a lot of the old school directors.
It's a way to keep you from watching Raw.
Oh, yeah, anything but Raw.
I don't watch it either, so I understand.
Yeah. Joe, I think you may join us in that same
I'd rather watch a horror movie. Yeah.
Roar is a horror.
But not the good horror.
Jamie, what she thought, the reaction of the fans was a huge thumbs down. They didn't hardly reference it the next night after that last pay-per-view with the zombie lumberjack thing where they supposedly devoured The Miz, and then he's back on TV within 2 weeks.
Well, that's because zombies need brains to live. Yeah. So obviously...
And you're saying they didn't get it from The Miz, yeah. There was diet food there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Brains light.
Joe, any thoughts on any of this we're talking? I know it doesn't relate to Brian Pillman or...
Well, I mean, I didn't watch the zombie segment, probably thankfully.
Yes.
But, that's the era we're living in with WWE, where it's so much more about quantity than quality. And they're working to serve a base that is not wrestling fans anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of the more diehard fans are left disenfranchised, and they have to look to AEW or Ring of Honor or the independents or, just the old school territories to kind of find that fill. I was very intrigued by the Fiend character when it first came to light, because it reminded me a lot of Jim Carrey in the Showtime series Kidding. It was this childlike, children's television host that had this very dark underbelly that slowly got exposed as time went on. But my issue with wrestling today is that why can't we have as you guys said, a horror-like character, or any character that's rooted in any type of mystique or dark arts or any type of the macabre that doesn't have these cinematic magical powers? I mean, as an announcer, I can sell if a wrestler thinks he's hearing voices, or he thinks he's messed up in the head, or he thinks that he's on this murderous rampage. But to actually do it and to teleport and to go to other realms and have magical powers, back in the day, Kevin Sullivan didn't need to do that. All he needed to do was speak in tongues and summon people from, under his spell. And
put an anaconda around his neck.
Or
exactly. You didn't need to go the extra realm where I've never been walking down the street and seen someone teleport. I've never seen that. And, so I can't suspend disbelief that far. And I think Jim Cornette one time said that, we're not selling that these Memphis characters really think they're mummies and Frankenstein's monster. They're just effed up people. And as a storyteller, I can sell that. But when you actually prove that you're otherworldly, I don't know how to sell that, because that's not something I've ever seen or become accustomed to. That's my issue with that, is that it goes from this cool counterculture thing, like Sting was back in the day, to just this hokey, cartoony magic act that doesn't have that edge anymore.
That's the theme.
The period of the Black Scorpion in WCW, like, what was it, 92-esque with Sting and Flair, and there was the Ole Anderson character. Anyway, I was at a party for, Last Gasp with Joe, what's the guy's name, the publisher who's near me in San Francisco. He's a longtime dental patient of mine. I'll think of his name in a while. But he had a party at Mitchell Brothers, and Penn and Teller were there. And we talked about that thing, and I think Teller was going to go in and help set up some of those stupid, low rent magic things, but he kind of washed his hands of it. But he was fully aware of that Black Scorpion stuff that was going on with all of the magic and whatnot.
At least the Black Scorpion thing was a short angle. It's not something that they drew out for very long.
It was pretty awful, like that guy that they resurrected from the dead and turned into a robot. What was that movie series? And they had Sting team up with him on a pay-per-view.
Oh, RoboCop.
That was insane.
RoboCop.
Yeah, RoboCop.
Boss, because I had worked the entirety of WCW's newsstand magazine, Jim Hurd is a complete a-hole. Suggesting that they have a Quasimodo Hunchback of Notre Dame character.
Because you couldn't pin him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that story, yes.
He's undefeated again.
A longtime friend of mine since 1970, Eddie Gilbert, his dad played Freddy Krueger in Memphis, with the mask. So they were like, and Joe must know that, all of those insane guys they had, and they would just be there for a week or two, and then they'd leave.
Like, for instance, when you had the horror character of Mankind, he was someone that was very believable, that, that Mick Foley would snap and go crazy because we've seen him build that character with Cactus Jack Manson, and that was something that was always in that background, even when he became more of a face, that you had that believability that he could snap back. WWE doesn't have the patience, or sometimes it has too much patience if Vince likes it, that the character, if it's not going anywhere. I mean, right now, I think the Playhouse character that we have, I'm blanking on her name, just Tina. That I don't think is going anywhere, or you don't see where it's actually leading to an angle. And so I think people get frustrated with it after a while, and they're not amused anymore. And the Fiend thing really didn't go anywhere. It didn't really have a true culmination to it. And I think people get frustrated with that. No one likes a horror movie that doesn't have an ending. When you see the end with a question mark at the end, that's my least favorite thing of how a movie can possibly end.
I saw Bray Wyatt at Madison Square Garden headline twice against John Cena and also against Roman Reigns. Place was packed. He was totally over. The fans loved the gimmick. And then they turned it into an absolute cartoon with the Fiend. They don't know when to stop. They don't know a good thing when they have it.
Yeah.
Let me ask Jamie and Joe very briefly while we're on this topic, the low rent at Impact, where they had Sue Young doing some of this teleporting and all this mysticism stuff with some of their other female characters like Jessica Havoc. What do you guys think of that? Does it look so hokey because they don't have even WWE's nowhere near their budget to do that stuff?
I'm kind of okay with some hokiness because I like some of my cheaper horror movies, but I mean they can only work within their budget, so they're not going to be able to compete with WWE.
The Undead Bride was what was that female that did the Virgin Princess angle in ECW that we all knew behind the scenes back in the Philly, Jersey days? Evan, you remember? Any of you guys remember the Virgin Princess? She came out at ECW. She was one of the female groupies, shall we say. But everybody loved her. She had a really good heart. Her sisters, they would all go to ECW, but they eventually, Heyman put her on TV as a character, and she came out with blood splattered. It looked like from the Stephen King.
Carrie, yeah.
Yeah, the wedding dress was all blood splattered. She was the Virgin Princess. I forget what her gimmicks were, but every time they started calling Sue Young the Undead Bride, or I don't know, I kept thinking of this female character in wrestling in the 90s.
And John Cosper actually did a fiction book about the Undead Bride and had her on the cover. It's a neat little book, a little quick read, fun book.
So, Joe, I have some questions for you about Ring of Honor. And first of all, tell us how you got started in Ring of Honor.
Well, I had been broadcasting throughout the independents for about 6 or 7 years beforehand, and my into Ring of Honor was a man by the name of Jimmy Jacobs. And I remember Jacobs texting me late one night because he was watching some Ring of Honor DVDs, and they really didn't have a set color analyst to work with Dave Prazak after Lenny Leonard had left. And Jimmy thought I would fit the bill. And with his help, I got in touch with Kerry Silkin and Adam Pierce, who were in charge at the time. And they gave me a tryout. And the very first event I did was they were all voiceover at the time, or at least the vast majority of them were. So we were at the studio in Bristol. And it was the Southern California event, SoCal Showdown, with Austin Aries versus Jushin Thunder Liger. It was the very first event I voiced for them.
It was at WrestleCon.
Yeah, and then that same weekend we voiced the 8th anniversary, where Tyler Black, Seth Rollins had won the world title, and it was off to the races for there. And I've been kind of in and out ever since, and my role has kind of changed depending on how the rest of the announce team has changed. Right now, I've been doing more with their Future of Honor and working with the young talent and helping tell them stories. But Ring of Honor was really the first big promotion to take a chance on me, and I'll forever be grateful for that.
Yeah, Joe, I go back with Ring of Honor to The Wrestler. I brought them into the Wrestler movie. And I think some of the greatest wrestling I ever saw live was Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness. Those are some of the greatest. That's Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair 20 years later. I mean, that's how great that was. And I was actually kind of upset because it seemed that the fans, after ROH did Madison Square Garden, they were kind of like front runners. All of a sudden, they were all AEW, and Ring of Honor. They were knocking, and I always thought Ring of Honor was excellent to this day. I mean, the fans kind of, I don't think they did good by them. Let's put it that way.
And that was where I was kind of leading to, is that why do you think that Ring of Honor still hasn't gotten the kind of traction that AEW now has as maybe the leading wrestling federation, or it's going head-to-head with the WWE. And Ring of Honor, I don't think ever went, in my opinion, head-to-head with the WWE.
No, well, I think, in a sense, everybody is always competing for the fans' dollar, but as far as direct competition, no. And I think AEW was lightning in a bottle. I mean, there was such a perfect storm that if you had asked any of us 3 to 4 years ago if any of this was possible, we would all have panned the idea. I remember it was in Chicago at a Ring of Honor event when I asked Matt Jackson how the sales for the first All In had gone, because that was the on-sale date. And he had told me they sold 10,000 tickets in whatever it was, an hour. And my jaw hit the floor. Theoretically, that shouldn't be possible for a company without, national and global clearance. But they've defied the odds from day one. And you add to that the backing of Tony Khan, you add to that the television clearance of the Turner networks, and it was right place, right time, right people, right everything. And I think any wrestling promotion, from Ring of Honor to Impact to anybody trying to get their foothold in the market share, that's something that's so hard to come by. And Ring of Honor was definitely, hurt, or at the very least needed to be in a transitional period, thanks to AEW, because 9 or 10 of their top guys were gone now. The Bucks and Cody and Omega and SCU and Best Friends, and all those guys leaving at once is going to force a company to rebuild. And what I like that Ring of Honor's done in kind of the pandemic era is be different by going back to that bare bones pure wrestling approach. I've loved watching the pure wrestling division. I've loved watching guys like Jonathan Gresham and Freddie Yehai and Tony Deppen, and they bring a different vibe and a different feel than anything WWE or AEW is doing. And I think that's what they need to do to forge an identity moving forward in a more competitive landscape than any other time since I've been in the business.
And they can always reinvent, when they get talent rated and people leave or, stolen or what have you. Jonathan Gresham is out of this world. I've shot him against quite a, all over the place. Obviously, APW, King of the Indies against Dragon Lee. And who else? Russ, another great lucha talent was on that show that he worked with. It was kind of a dream match. Man, I love Ring of Honor. I don't care what anybody says. I never miss that. And where I am in Los Angeles, we can watch it. The show's on 3 different networks, including... I guess it's a New Jersey, New England sports channel, Channel 56, just a lowly independent airs it. And the world's different from the show that precedes the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I keep trying to tell the station owner, can you guys see that Ring of Honor is a far superior show? That you guys are, it's just a much better product. Why don't you focus on that? But it is neat to see that they're still around, and that's the show. I don't miss that. I don't miss MLW Saturday mornings now, even though they're rebroadcast from like a year ago. Still fun to watch, and NXT is probably the only good product coming out of WWE. Obviously, AEW is fun to watch.
Now, Jamie, I have a couple questions I'd like to ask you. One is, astute observation. You're a lady, And when you go, first of all, you said you grew up in a small town in Canada that only had 2 TV stations. So how did you, first of all, find wrestling? And second of all, did people think it was kind of strange? Because when I was growing up, girls really didn't watch wrestling. It was really a boy kind of thing to watch. And girls just like, oh, this is too barbaric.
There was X amount, but they just maybe perhaps didn't admit it. I know a lot.
Not in my high school. The guys were. It was truly a guy thing. If you had a copy of Pro Wrestling Illustrated in your locker, that was pretty much girl deterrent. Well,
it wouldn't have been in my case. I would have.
Okay.
But
well, then I was known you back then. But so how did you find wrestling in such a small town? And then what was the general impression of people growing up that you were so into wrestling when maybe other girls weren't?
So my aunt, she lived in British Columbia. I lived in the province of Saskatchewan, and she had much better TV, and she would send us VHS tapes of cartoons. And on one tape she sent had wrestling, and it was leading up to WrestleMania 5. And it was the Mega Powers had just exploded, and Miss Elizabeth, and I was just sunk. I was just gone. Like that was everything I wanted to see and more. And then I had an uncle who, not this aunt's husband, a different relative. He did a lot of behind the scenes work because he has his master's in recreational facilities, and he teaches people about running recreational facilities. And so when wrestling would come to Vancouver, he was usually behind the scenes, and he volunteered to do music, do robes, drive the wrestlers and stuff. So he was getting me lots of autographs, posters, like different things. So, and he would sometimes send videotapes too. But eventually we did get to about 12 or 13 channels. And one of those was Channel 10. And then I could watch Wrestling Superstars on Saturday mornings. Then a few years after that, we got TBS. So I could also watch WCW. And magazines also supplemented a lot of that because we didn't have internet and stuff. And was it accepted? No. I was bullied severely for liking wrestling, being a girl that liked wrestling. I think a lot of the females in my life, older females like my mother and things like that, were hoping I would grow out of it. And I never did. So, but it wasn't something I could, really brag about. It was something for the longest time I kept to myself. And now with social media, that's one positive thing about social media is you can find a lot more other women who are into wrestling. There's a lot. And when I first started with Slam, there wasn't very many women either. That's one of the reasons that Greg Oliver suggested I put Melissa in my name, which is my middle name, because Jamie is a masculine name as well as feminine. And he wanted people to know he had a girl writing for Slam. So,
Jamie, what's behind you? Because I see it looks like Savage and Elizabeth. Then is that Ox Baker?
Oh yeah.
Are those framed photos or books?
Yeah, they're all framed ones, and I've got quite a few autographs, and I got a Sabu up there, and just got this one. This one is brand new. This is a $1 Million Man with, unfortunately, doesn't have Sherry's. Oh, there's a bit of glare. Here we go.
So very good.
I don't buy a lot of autographs. I get a lot of them as gifts. So that was kind of the first one I've ever bought myself was this Ted DiBiase one, but yeah, I'm kind of easy to buy for wrestling stuff.
What kind of action figures are those? Some AEW ones? Because I can't find.
I don't have any AEW, but I have Sting WCW. I've got a lot of Honky Tonk Man because my uncle is friends with him. So he's through the years given me several Honky Tonk Man ones, and even put one on my wedding table when I got married. He was in a very nice white dressy outfit. Was on my head table, and I've got Elizabeth. A lot of the women and things like that, but. It's mostly WWE.
And Joe, what's that behind you? It looks like a casket. Is the Undertaker remake? What is that? Yeah,
I believe that is a box that holds a Jeff Jarrett replica guitar.
Oh,
and okay. I'm not sure. I haven't decided if I'm going to actually learn to play the guitar or resell it, or just smash it over the head of one of my loved ones. It could go either way at this point, possibly more than one. So time will tell.
Wow. Where'd you find that?
I have a question for both our guests. Joe, what makes a great announcer? And Jamie, what makes a great wrestling book writer? I'll let Joe go first.
Sure.
Well, what makes a good wrestling announcer is somebody that realizes more than anything else, it is not about you. My goal is always to enhance the talent. It's always to not just talk about the moves, not just talk about what you can visually see, but also go a layer deep and explain why that move is happening, how it's happening, what happened to get us here, and what did the characters in the ring hope to achieve. I want somebody who's never watched the particular event or promotion that I'm working for to be able to tune in and at least have a general understanding of what's going on. And as JR would say, I need to be the lyrics to the music that they're writing. And the problem on the independents is so many announcers and commentators get into it for the wrong reasons. And they want to do it to put themselves over, or do amateur stand-up comedy night, or just show off how cool they are from how many swear words they can spout off in a 5-minute span. And it really is distracting, and it takes away from the product when the announcer thinks he's more entertaining than the action in the ring. He's not. I'm not. I'm here.
Never worked blue. Never worked blue. I'm
here to enhance what people are paying to see. And nobody's ever going to pay to see me. And I'm completely fine with that. But it is my hope that my presence there will make people more likely to pay to see an overall product, because hopefully I'll make it a little more entertaining and a little more dramatic. And as long as I can prop everybody up a little bit more, then I've done my job.
There you go. And Jamie?
I think if you are a wrestler writing your own story, you definitely need to, I always say, you got to be vulnerable, because people are coming to this book for the whole story. And I don't pretend that's easy by any means. Like, I don't want everybody knowing all my secrets in my whole life. I'm not a perfect person by any means, but you do have to be vulnerable. And people basically want to tell all, whether that's fair or not. That's what they want. And if you are someone doing a biography, or you're working with someone, you just have to kind of dig in. And a lot of people want to present a polished story. This is the version of the book I want. And you have to be willing to make the subject uncomfortable and dig in and get those questions out there, because wrestling fans can be ruthless, especially with books. Like, there's certain things they want, there's certain expectations. And, like in journalism, we always do fact checking. Wrestling fans are always fact checking. Like, you just look at like the A&E shows and the Dark Side of the Ring shows. As soon as those are posted, people are like, they had this wrong. And they do that for books as well. So fact checking, vulnerability, and just getting uncomfortable.
Evan knows all about that. He just got done
Evan
writing his book.
The thing that I always wonder about with wrestling books is, why isn't the actual writing more important? How many wrestling books would you say have great writing? You're not going to mistake any of it for Hemingway,
right?
Or it's basically
It's Brett, it's Mick, and Jericho were, I think, the ones that took the greatest hand. Maybe Jamie would agree with me or add some names in there. They really went after it, as opposed to Ric Flair, whose book was really panned. If you remember when it came out, they just said, "Oh, it sounds like Vince is doing the talking," or, was a mouthpiece for most of it.
I like the Dynamite Kid book as well. I like the Jeannie Clark book as well. She was Lady Blossom. There's the ones you were saying are good too. There's and Mick was one of the first ones I read, but I was a big fan of Pure Dynamite, because it wasn't shiny by any means. It was all the warts and all very much look at Tom Billington.
I thought, out of all the wrestling books I've read, and believe me, there's plenty I haven't read, I enjoyed J.J. Dillon's book because it was from the perspective of a fan, a wrestler, a referee, a office guy. It really looked at the business from pretty much all sides. I think everything except maybe a promoter. I mean, he did it all, and I found his book very interesting. But yeah, I agree. I'm reading Ric Flair's book, and he writes like one paragraph on Ray Stevens, and then he does like 3 chapters on some meaningless WWE pay-per-view. And I just said, what a disappointment this was. And he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
Oh, let me throw this out there, because Jamie, I don't know if you get the Svengoolie show out of Chicago, where Joe, are you at it?
Saturday nights, yeah.
Oh, is it incredible? Last week, and I had forgotten this, because any of us who know or been out with Flair, he loves 50s, 60s, oldies music. So Freddie Cannon was the guest last weekend. Boom Boom Cannon, who did Palisades Park, Lassie from Tallahassee, all these, early 60s, late 50s, big, huge rock and roll music things. And he said this is where, because in most of his songs and in his interviews back then, he did woo. and he said Flair's admitted taking my woo and stealing it, paying tribute to it. So that's where it came from. Was rock and roll brought about during right before he and Svengoolie were talking. Rich Koss, who plays Svengoolie and has for decades, and is the second Svengoolie, not the original.
Right.
They were talking before doing a parody monster video that Jim Cornette was in amongst Penn and Teller and Gilbert Gottfried and all these celebrities. But the coolest takeaway from that, and it's a must-see episode if it's online, from last week, was this revelation of where Flair got it, and he is a huge 50s, 60s rock fan. Let me ask you very quickly, I'm finally putting out, or trying to, Evan's got his second great book coming out, or maybe it's his third, because he did that one on his dad, Apartment
4B, like in Brooklyn.
I'm finally got the stuff that I'd worked on like 20, 30 years ago with Johnny Valentine, my book Rib. I'm supposed to be Abby on the COVID con asked me to co-write his book, but he's not following through with his stuff. And now a guy that seems motivated, I'm trying to do a book with Don Morocco, who I interviewed last week on the Crazy Train radio show. But what books are out there? Who would you like to see, Jamie? Actually, both of you, books done on that haven't been done. Who's really out there screaming for a book? Please don't say Vince McMahon. I think that book is coming.
Yeah, that's coming in 2022. I would say CM Punk. I wish there was a better China book, because the WWE version she got was very disappointing. Sensational Sherry, Miss Elizabeth, and Macho Man. Those are, I mean, I can go on and on, but those are ones I'd really end. And I'm also looking forward to Evan's book as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Joe, who would you like to see?
Man, that's a hell of a list. I don't know if I could top that.
I ruined it.
Punk definitely jumps out at me. I'll tell you what, I wish that there were more from the bygone era. I wish things maybe the business had opened up a little sooner to where some of the great promoters of the past could be a little more open about just running a business in this territory. Guys like, Sam Mushnick and Vern Gagne and Eddie Graham. I think, especially Eddie Graham, with how he influenced Dusty and Sullivan and so many great minds, just to be able to have him sit down, put pen to paper, and kind of just whack some of that philosophy would be so valuable for people from generations to come.
Jerry, another brilliant mind, because Bill Watts' book was good, if you guys saw that from, forget the publisher, but Jerry Jarrett, when he put out that book on creating TNA, there wasn't enough on his own background and, transitioning and taking over the Nick Goulas territory sort of aggressively. That would be, I think, Jerry Jarrett, or a book on the brilliant minds of wrestling. Maybe our Steve, oh God, I can't think of his name now, the guy that I used to work with at PWI who retired, Dan Murphy. He could do a book like that. He just did one on the greatest wrestlers that have respect.
The wrestlers, yeah.
You know what would be? Would be a poignant book on the Graham family? 3 generations of suicides. That would be a powerful book.
Yeah.
Really, that would elevate. What's that? What's that, Mike?
Dark side of the ring up there.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm
do
not
a month-long series on it.
I'm not saying for dirt. I'm saying, it's a real Von Erich level tragic story, and I just think it would be very poignant and powerful. What was rough for me was reading the Eddie Guerrero book, because I'm reading it and he's gone already.
Right.
So as you're reading it, you're pulling for the guy. He's going to overcome his addictions. He's going to overcome his demons. And in the back of your head, you're going, the guy's gone already.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the giant spoiler alert, running.
It was a rough read,
while you're reading it.
It's not a nice guy on the planet for any of us that got to ride around with Art Barr, he and Eddie in Mexico City, or Art's only tour in New Japan. 2 of the nicest guys. I'll have to throw out some photos for you guys to put up, because you could see the hijinks that they were doing backstage at AAA shows. I at least was able to photograph. They were just a nice, Eddie in particular, even before he found religion.
Here's the most obvious. Why doesn't Dr. Mike write a book because you lived all the territories. You met all these guys. You're living history. Seriously. I'm not saying it because you're my friend to buddy up. I mean
Well, I had a question for Joe.
On Joe's DVD, I wanted to first ask, and then I'll shut up because I know Russ was probably going to ask Jamie a question. But who did these caricatures? They are amazing. Jamie, if you've seen like the back ones, I'm looking at another guy I was around the roads with, Chris Candido. There's Steve Regal, Shark Boy, Al Snow with Head, Conan, and Dean Malenko. Who did these caricatures? They're fantastic.
Well, when we were developing the cover art and the graphics designs, I really wanted to stay true to the original Pillman events, because every event logo and event T-shirt back in the day had a different artist rendering of Brian Pillman Sr. And I wanted to bring that forward. And there's an artist by the name of Franklin O'Neill out of Erie, Pennsylvania. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. I believe he's at Artist of Pro Wrestling on Instagram. I hope I'm not messing that up. But he did a lot of these caricatures, and he would go to some of these Legends events and conventions around here, and he'd present the wrestlers with like framed 8x10s of his drawings. And I thought of him right away as somebody who had a lot of these talents already drawn and could do a lot more to really capture that authenticity. He already had the Brian Pillman drawing and most of the ones on that cover, and I think a couple more he ended up doing as we were putting it together. But Franklin, to me, perfectly captured the essence of what I wanted that cover to be, and it saved my graphics designer from having to try to find copyright-free photos of everybody. So really, everybody wins in that regard.
I did send you some, but it was kind of at the tail end when we met through.
Yeah,
Rest.
but some of yours made it to the B-roll of the documentary, though, for sure.
So Joe, I have a question. When you were at Ring of Honor, were you there at the time that Mark Smith was working? When he was doing his Ring of Honor work?
At the time of who?
Oh, Mark. Yeah, Mark Bison Smith.
Bison Smith, I think I'd met him just once or twice. The thing is that when I was at Ring of Honor at first, I was very, very rarely at the events. I was usually in the studio voicing, so I didn't cross paths with talent except for if I came in to visit or if we did like a live pay-per-view. So I probably met him in passing once or twice. I think I called a couple of his matches via voiceover, but I didn't really, unfortunately, know him that well.
So that brings me. He is a good friend of mine, but that's a different story for another time. But did you find it more of a challenge to do in studio work versus covering a live match?
Oh, absolutely, because you have to recreate the energy, and it's very tough to feel the action and feel the emotion and just feel this business when you're in a dead silent studio. And it took me a while to learn how to kind of have the right inflection in my voice and kind of carry that energy to fit, something that's not going on around me. I think I'm better at it now, but I don't think there's a true 100% bulletproof way to replicate that. Live is always better, but there's a way to do it in post. You just have to keep yourself amped up and energetic, because it can be so easy to speak in a tone that's, once it's overlaid with the actual event, is drowned out by the audience, drowned out by the music, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a challenge, but like anything in this business, it's something you have to adapt to and just learn to make the best out of.
Easiest thing I've done in wrestling is color commentary with the right play-by-play. Hardest thing I've ever had to do in wrestling, and I'd rather take a choke slam than have to do play-by-play by myself. That, to me, I had to do that once for a show up in Petaluma. The Young Bucks were on, and I sucked. I can just tell you straight out, I was awful. And I thought, I can do play-by-play. I've been doing color next to my friend JJ for 3-4 years. I can just do play-by-play. No problem. I know all the moves and all this stuff. Just the turd sandwich with diarrhea as a on the side. It was just really awful. And so So, how do you deal with either finding the right color person for you, or would you rather then just do everything yourself and do all of it just on your own?
Well, I mean, a good announcer or not, I can tell you're quite the storyteller with the church sandwich picture you just painted in my head. But be that as it may.
And I said not working blue, too, so yeah.
It's obviously when I'm with the right, the right partner. Steve Carino comes to mind. A gentleman out of Cleveland named Aaron McGuire. When you can feel that chemistry and it's on all cylinders, then that's preferred. As a play-by-play guy, I try to be very malleable in the sense that I can work with pretty much anybody, any style. Just a few weeks ago in Chicago, I was working with someone who had never done commentary before. They had done podcasts, and I think they were in a band, but they'd never actually done wrestling commentary. And to me, I don't like to say carrying because it sounds kind of derisive. What I try to do is just make sure they're in the place they need to be. If I'm going to feed them on a question or a talking point or something about a particular star, I want to give them enough to where they can tell where I'm going. And it's very much improv from there. And the number one rule in anyone who does improv, it's yes and. It's you take what your partner says and you build on it. And I think that's the best way to tell a story there, is that they have a little bit of a safety net where they know that they can experiment and they can kind of find that comfort zone. And if they deviate off the path, I'm going to be there to make sure we stay on the tracks. But it's a lot harder to find that right partner than it would seem because, and as you mentioned just a moment ago, a play-by-play is a lot more difficult than people think it is.
People don't think it's as hard as it is.
You don't realize how difficult it is until you're actually sitting there doing it. And they're like, oh, I have to do this for 3 hours. Yeah. So there's no formal training for it. There's no school to go to for wrestling commentary specifically. So a lot of times it's people who are wrestlers or people who help out or people who just have the dream of doing it. And it's very much learn as you go. I've had a lot of mentors, but I can't say I was ever trained or taught to do it. It's just a lot of trial and error. So
how different is it having somebody in your ear versus doing it on the fly on your own? And how many have you done? Have you even done any where somebody's been in your ear, constantly, not just with times and things like that?
Not necessarily constantly. Luckily, I work with a lot of people who give me enough freedom and have enough trust in me to steer the ship where it needs to go. I've worked with IFBs. I've worked with people in my headset before. Really the most involved when I did Triple Mania down in Mexico for AAA a couple of years ago. I had somebody in my ear who was translating a lot of the Spanish promos to English, who was shouting out some of the questions and comments in the Twitch chat room, just so we can be more interactive in that regard. And in that respect, that was probably the most involved anyone has ever been. And I was still happy and thankful for that because it served two purposes that helped the show out. One thing that I've learned from talking to guys who have been in places like WWE is that it's very important to be able to direct traffic more than calling a match. And that's knowing, pitching to the B-roll, pitching to the sponsor plug, and just knowing where to come in and out of everything else that's not calling the match. And whenever I have a chance to do that on an independent show, I savor the opportunity because any chance I can have to be uncomfortable means I'm learning. So I like that challenge and I like that chance to learn or work in an aspect of this job that I still haven't had a lot of time and attention with.
And Jamie, you do podcasts. Any interest in doing announcing, or have you done announcing yourself?
I haven't. No, I haven't done any announcing. I don't know. Podcast is still pretty new. I'm used to sitting behind my computer typing. So being on camera and talking with others, I'm still learning at that. So I think it would take a bit to do some commentary. I'll leave it up to Joe and the other pros right now, but never say never. It's wrestling. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so Joe, what would you think in your thoughts when you did do a Ring of Honor match? What do you think your favorite match was to announce?
It's always such a difficult question. It's like asking somebody's favorite child, and they happen to have about 100 different children.
I got twins, so I can tell you which one.
Yeah.
All right, you may be the exception to the rule. I think what's gotten a lot of the most attention has been either Seth Rollins' world title reign or his defense against Davey Richards at Death Before Dishonor 8 in Toronto in 2010. I also think back to the debut of Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin in New York City against Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli. I was honored to be part of the brief Samoa Joe return in 2015, I think it was, between Impact and WWE. Him and Michael Elgin in Chicago was a red hot crowd. And I'm also very partial to the first ballpark brawl that Ring of Honor did at MCU Park in Brooklyn. And it was AJ Styles, Adam Cole, Michael Elgin, and Jay Briscoe, I believe, in a four-way match in the main event. So I could go on, but those are probably the top, 4 or 5 that jump out the most to me.
Thanks. And so you know Adam Pearce, right? You'd met him while you were there at Ring of Honor.
He was my boss for about 7 or 8 months. So
and I had a chance to meet him 20 years ago when he came out and worked a show here in Northern California in Vallejo, and I really liked the guy. Why do you think he was such a failure in the WWE, or do you think that that's still a work in progress and there's a way he can get himself back into the good graces? They
only hired him as a booker because of the excellent job he did with Ring of Honor, and they sent him down to NXT. He was down there for a long time. He actually routinely, he would come up from his home promotion, UPW, Rick Bassman's promotion in LA, and wrestle for the Roland Alexander APW, our home base, Russ and my home base promotion in Northern Cal, all the time. And he was in the very first Ring of Honor, King of the Indies in 2001, which begat Ring of Honor, Evolve, pretty much everything that came after that. And I still keep in touch with him to this day. He's a cool guy, but this wasn't a failure in WWE. He's, they're having him as this on-screen character now, as opposed to the behind-the-scenes work he was doing at ROH and NXT, etc. Right?
Yeah, I think as long as Adam Pearce is, he's collecting a paycheck for the top company in the world, you can't categorize him as a failure. And I don't know the details of what roles he's worn in WWE or NXT, but I can speak to the fact that he became booker in Ring of Honor during a very difficult time because it was another transitional phase for Ring of Honor. They had just come off of the Gabe Sapolsky era, and they needed change, and they needed to cut the budget, and they needed a fresh mind. And Adam steered that ship through some very, very rough waters. And without him doing that, who knows if Ring of Honor would have gotten to the Sinclair sale, would have gotten to the Delirious and Jim Cornette and everything that would come after that. I think Adam is an incredible mind. I think I'm better for having worked with him and worked for him. And the fact that he's in WWE shows that they see value in him on camera and off. And the fact that he has never been a part of the WWE system as a wrestler, but was still brought in and wore so many hats in an administrative and office position, I think shows the power of being able to have that DIY mentality and tighten your bootstraps and just work your ass off, because nothing's impossible if you're good enough at what you do. Adam made it to the dance, and I think it's going to be a long, long time before he winds up leaving, because he has a lot to offer to anybody that wants to utilize it.
Joe, Evan's only got a couple of minutes. He's going to be doing another show with, he can talk about that. But I wanted him to tell us how this came about, because this is 4 years of all the Les Thatcher promoted Brian Pillman memorial shows. I also called him the Brian Hildebrand because he was tagged on there. He passed away about the same time, a couple of months later after Pill passed. It's got 4 years of that, tons of extras, and the cadre of talent that showed up to support Brian Pillman and Brian Hildebrand was just amazing. How did this project for you come about?
Well, I've known Les Thatcher for probably about 15 years, and he was somebody that I wanted to seek out when I was young to get feedback from and just learn what I could do better as an announcer and how I could get my name out there a little better. And we've had a chance to work together on a number of small projects over the years. But when he had told me he had the HWA Heartland footage still in storage, I was intrigued by that because, some OVW footage is leaked out and FCW, NXT, but nobody really talks about Heartland and its time as WWF developmental and guys like Jamie Noble and Charlie Haas and 3 Minute Warning and D'Lo came down and all the guys that came in from WCW, Shannon Moore, Jimmy Yang, all those guys. There was so much, of that history missing. And I wanted to preserve that, and that's where we started doing the Wrestling from the Heartland series, where Les and I would voice over house show tapes and just single camera shoots that were used for internal use, and stuff that's never ever been released on a wide scale, if at all. And the Pillman tapes were in that storage, and I asked Les, is this fair game? Can we do something with this? And Les told me no, because the rights to distribute went to the Brian Pillman family, the Brian Pillman estate. And for obvious reasons, many of which are more public now because of Dark Side of the Ring, they were very far away from the professional wrestling business for a long time. But a few years ago, Brian Jr. starts training with Lance Storm. I have mutual friends that also trained with Lance. And Brian, living in Cincinnati at the time and me running events in Cleveland, opened the door for us to do some business together. And once we got a trust and a relationship, I pitched the idea to him. Do you think we can do this? Do you think we can have the blessing of you and the family? Do you think we can bring a part of history out there and bring it to a whole new audience? This has never seen it before. And he was all for it. And man, it's taken off like crazy from there. And I've been trying everything I can just to keep up with sales because the response has been unlike anything I've seen before. And I'm so thankful for it.
And you can get this at ProWrestlingLibrary.com, PillmanShow.com. Joe is at /Dombrowski.com. There's a lot of places. Where else do you want to send people?
PillmanShow.com is the main site to get the DVD set, and we've got some results and some history and some rare photos. And we'll be adding some more stuff about the shows and about Les as time goes on. Joe-Dombrowski.com is all of my DVD releases. We've got everything from The Legend of Virgil to the Montreal Theory to Refereeing 101 to Johnny Gargano's first TV matches. We got a little something for everybody, no matter what kind of a wrestling fan you are. The Heartland tapes that I just talked about are on there too. And ProWrestlingLibrary.com is the site for all the digital versions of those DVDs. We've got over 500 hours you can rent, buy, or subscribe to get a lot of cool stuff on there too. And anybody who wants more updates on my projects or my appearances, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe_Dombrowski. I've got all the updates there, and I'll keep adding stuff as we know more. But that's all my stuff. That's all my product. If anybody hears something they like, please support. Vote with your dollar. That's the only way we can make the wrestling business better. That's the only way we can voice our opinion to its fullest, is find what we like and support it instead of tearing down what we don't. And I hope we can all do that better as the years go on.
I think very briefly, Les, I think we had him on our old Legend show over however many years that was, 8, 9, 10, more times than anybody else. I still say he's the sharpest guy from the territory period, debuting, 59 under his real name. I think Les still is sharp to this day. We had him on not that long ago, and just what a great guy. He really worked his butt off in doing these originally. But anyway, don't want to take away from Jamie's time.
Yeah, Jamie, plug whatever you want to plug.
Sure. So if you go to slamwrestling.net and search for Jamie Hemmings, you can see all the stories I've done over the years, from the very green days to now. And also, I'm on Twitter at Jamie Hemmings and then the number 1. And I spell Jamie Jamie. Also, I have the Figure Gore podcast. And if you go onto Facebook and search for the Figure Gore, please like our page. My co-hosts are myself, Rob Bellamy, Joe Tong, and of course, the one and only Madman Pondo. And we're constantly putting stuff on the page of what we're watching, a lot of Pondo footage. And there's a lot of Pondo doesn't quite often like the glasses I wear, so he'll make silly memes of different glasses I have. It's just a lot of fun. So go on to Figure Gore page on Facebook.
And I think there's a connection between hardcore wrestling and horror also, because some of these guys do some gory stuff.
I kind of got into it by accident on the Kenny Casanova has the bookmarks page, and John Cosper did a death match panel. And I didn't really know a lot about death matches. I didn't really watch that growing up, and I wasn't a tape trader and all that. So I kind of got interested watching that panel, and then became friends with Pondo, introduced by John Cosper, and also found out Pondo's a huge horror fan. So we just had lots to talk about, and he recommended different death matches to kind of look into. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning about death matches, but no more than I did.
Check out Low Life Louis Ramos. He's my buddy.
Sure.
Crazy death matches. Crazy.
And Jamie, just to let you know, after I'm done recording the show, while I'm putting the show together and getting it ready to upload to the internet, I watch Creature Features.
Ooh.
Which is the local horror, horror movie. It's from an indie station here in the BayArea. And then they'll show really bad horror movies. They showed Night of the Living Dead a couple weeks ago. So
that's a really good horror movie.
That's pretty good, actually. Yeah. I watched things for the first time.
They've shown some really awful ones too. They run, their budgets are relatively low. So all I got to say is that I would love to be on your podcast one of these days. I'm just as big a horror fan as you are, I think, going back a ways. But so do either of you have any new projects that you have planned? Anything big that's coming down the pipe?
I have some stories coming up. Ones that I've done is I reviewed an anthology that's called Professional Wrestling, Politics, and Populism. That's coming up. It's discussing how pro wrestling is also very political. Who would have thought?
Do you talk about Lee Atwater?
No, that one's not mentioned in the book. No.
You don't?
It's an anthology that it's different stories contributed in this anthology that I review. That one.
I gotta talk to you a little bit about Lee Atwater, but that's for another time.
Oh, that one's not in there.
Own book? Write a book about, or have you?
I have not written a book. I've thought about it, and never say never. We'll see. Right now,
these two guys, they're the men when it comes to.
Right now, I've got so many to read. So and I also got I have a son too and stuff. But you never say never. Who knows?
And Joe, do you have any? What's next after this Pillman DVD?
Hopefully a lot of naps to make up for the long nights filling orders. But no, I think next we still have some footage in the can, me and Les do, that we've already voiced, so we can do Wrestling from the Heartland Volume 3 and get even more rare gems out there from Cincinnati with guys like Big Show and Mark Henry and Charlie Haas and Kevin Nash. From rookies to legends, a lot of stuff in there. And I'm looking to get back on the road doing more broadcasting now that the world's opened back up. I will be back in Chicago on Friday the 11th for a live pay-per-view on Fight TV, courtesy of AAW Wrestling. We'll be at 115 Bourbon Street in the Chicago area in Marionette Park. And the next day, I'll be back around my home base in suburban Pittsburgh in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, for IWC Reloaded, and that'll be on the IWC network at IWCWrestling.com, and I believe coming soon to Fight TV as well. So looking to get back out there to do some broadcasting, probably hit some conventions, and get back to a full schedule and get back to that fine line between busyness and burnout that I like to ride so well.
Go.
Well, we'd love to have you both on as guests again. You're fantastic. You have anything new that's coming up, let us know so we can help you promote it. And really enjoyed having you both on tonight. You're fascinating in every way.
Thank you
both. Thank you, guys. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that's it for this week, everyone. We'll see everybody next week with other great guests and another great show. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Oh.